And here I'm thinking about how many people in this room are familiar with Leandro Guzman Feliz. It's a 15-year-old boy who was murdered in the Bronx last year. So if you're in New York, you probably heard a lot about this. And the narrative around it is that he was an innocent kid who was mistaken for a bad kid, right? He was the kid who was hacked apart with machetes in front of a bodega in the Bronx. And the idea is that he was mistaken for someone else by Trinitarios, right, who are a Dominican gang that comes out of Rikers, as most of the radical politics of New York City has done for many, many years. But the part of the story that gets emphasized in different ways is that he was an explorer, right, which is a program that the NYPD has to bring youth in to eventually work for them. And so when I think about this politics of silence that I'm talking about in the archives, right, and how silence can be a really radical presence historically, I think it's a radical presence today. When people talk about snitches get stitches, right, or when we think about a history of anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa and necklacing, right, and that kind of violence towards people who are collaborating or who are working against their communities, we have to consider a radical moment in 2018 in which people are using machetes to hack apart a 15-year-old boy who's working with the police. The way the story about his innocence and the inherent violence of the people who hacked him apart become the narrative we tell. About how the loss of innocence is the story we mourn. And it's so much more difficult to understand what kind of freedom could we achieve by being willing to confront those within the community who are working against the interests of the community as a whole at the end of a machete. So I will end there. Thank you for listening.